Hello and welcome. I hope that you're all doing well. In this video, we're going to be learning how to create databases in tables in MySQL. I'm also just going to briefly talk about installing MySQL and give you some general pointers on how you are able to do this. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So to start off, I'm going to talk a little bit about installing MySQL and getting things set up with it. The way that I'm going to be demonstrating MySQL is using the utility called XAMPP. And the reason why I'm using XAMPP is because it comes with a lot of good utilities for web development in general. And in addition to that, it's supported on all three platforms, Windows, Linux, and OS X. And it creates a very simple way to set up MySQL on your device with a really easy installer to follow through on and a nice administrative panel to work through MySQL with. You can just install MySQL. So you can just look up MySQL and download it. However, I really recommend using XAMPP because it provides a lot of different tools and utilities, and it will make it easier to sort of follow along through what's called PHP-MyAdmin, which is this nice toolkit right here that we're going to be working with throughout these videos. So once you do have XAMPP installed, what will happen is you'll get this control panel here. And in this control panel, you could turn on whatever components you need in order to be able to set up your web server. You can see right now I have Apache running and I have MySQL running. These are the two main things that we typically have on a web server running if we're running like a traditional PHP-based application. So getting MySQL running is the main thing that you want. So you're just going to press on Start for MySQL and it will launch it and it will be running. Once you do that, you can click on this admin button and that will take you to PHP-MyAdmin where we'll be able to actually work with our SQL code. So SQL is a language that's used by relational databases in order to be able to tell it to do various different things. What we're going to do first is we're going to create a database. A database can be thought of as like a container that contains all of the different files related to a particular application. Inside of a database, we will have tables. And like I said before, tables are like a container for data. So every single data point is contained within a table, and tables are contained within a database. A database is used for a particular application usually, and then each of the tables describes something that the application needs to run, and then all the data points inside of there are the data that's used by the application itself. So with this, we actually have to start off by creating a database and then creating a table. So to do this, I'm going to click on this SQL button here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run some SQL code. So let me just zoom this in a little bit so it's easier to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new database called, we'll call it shop. And inside of the shop, we'll have products and maybe a few other things. So I'm going to create a database. So I'm going to say create database. And then I put down the name of the database. The name of the database in this case is going to be shop. Now I put a semicolon at the end of the statement. The semicolon is not really required unless you have multiple SQL statements being run at the same time. So I always just put it in just to get a habit of doing so. I would say it's always best to put a semicolon at the end of a statement or query, just that way there's no ambiguity in the interpreter towards what you are trying to do. You can see that SQL is actually a very simple language because all it really does is it combines together plain English keywords in order to create different components of the database and then query to see the various different types of components. So it's a language that you're going to be able to pick up very quickly compared to things like JavaScript and HTML, which are maybe a little bit more complex. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a database called shop. When I press on go, it will run my query. Now, when I come back over to this side panel here, this shows all of my databases. Now, what I should do is I should refresh this, and you'll see that shop now exists. So this database here. Now, inside of this database, we can create a table. If I click on shop and then click on SQL, this will allow me to run queries inside of my new shop database. So all of the queries will get applied to this database now. What I want to do is I want to create a table called products, which contains information about different products in my shop. To create a table, we simply type in create table, and I want to give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to call it products. And then I need to put in all of the columns that exist inside of the table. So like I said before, a row is a data point, and a column describes different components of the data points. So we're thinking about the columns, we're thinking about, well, what sort of things can my product have? And what I'm going to put in is I'm going to give my product an ID, which uniquely identifies it. So that way we can use that ID if we ever want a unique identifier for the product. I'm going to give my product a name, so the name of the product itself. And then I'm going to give my product a price. And that'll be the price that someone has to pay in order to purchase my product. So with that, we can start to write out each of those components. So I'm going to say product ID. Now, what I have to do is I have to provide the column name. So in this case, product ID is the name of the column. But then I also have to provide a data type. So what type of data am I storing inside of this column? So there's a lot of different types of data that exist inside of MySQL. There's like integers, there's numeric data, and then there's text data. Those are going to be the main three that I'm going to talk about here. There's a lot of different types of columns that exist. Like there's a huge list of them. If you're ever looking for a specific data type, you can look it up in the documentation. There'll be a lot of information on that. But we're primarily just going to talk about the main three here, which are going to be our varchar, which is our text, our int, which is integer, and then numeric, which is decimal values. So for product ID, we're going to use a varchar, which is essentially text. So we type in varchar like this. It means, I believe, variable character. It's just like a number of different characters. We have to tell it how many characters we expect to see inside of this column. This is the size of the actual column itself. So for example, if the product ID can be 100 characters or less, we would put 100 here. What this does is it defines a set of text 100 characters or less in size, and that is what the product ID will be. So it tells it the product ID is the column, the varchar is the type, so it's going to be text data, and then 100 is the length of it, so it could be 100 characters or less. That's the way that you interpret this line here. Now to add another column, we simply put a comma and we put the next column. In this case, product underscore name is going to be my next one. So the name of the product. This is going to be a varchar, and I'm also going to make this size 100. So we'll see that the name could be 100 characters or less, and it's text. Then finally, we're going to have the price for the product. This is going to be numeric. What numeric is it's decimal values. So these are going to be values that can contain decimals. When we talk about the size of numeric values, we have two pieces. We have the actual size and then what's called the precision. The precision is how many values appear after the decimal, and then the size is just the general size of the variable itself. So what this is saying is it's saying that there is a total size of 7. And I believe that this is combined between things before and after the decimal. So it would be 7 total digits, and then 2 are after the decimal. So when we're looking at things in terms of price, 2 after the decimal means that we have like the cents, right? And then we have the dollars on the other side. That's the way that we're sort of interpreting this type of variable. So this is the way that we define our table. Again, we have the name of the table, we have each of the columns that exist, and then the data types for each of those columns. At this point, I can press go once again, and you can see that it runs my query. Now you see that we have this products table, and you can see that each of the columns has been created as we discussed. So at this point, we have a simple database and a simple table set up. In the next video, I'm going to show you how we can get data into these tables. So thank you for watching this video, and in the next one, we'll take a look at inserting data into tables.